How's everybody doing? Good. Awesome. Everybody's here for AVC 200, right? Animation interactivity. Super. Okay. Those of you taking other classes with me, some of the structural stuff here at the beginning will be the same, but some people weren't. So I'm Casey Farina. I'll be the instructor for this class. I teach 3 classes here, maybe 4 a semester. So in the mornings, I'm teaching 3D modeling in this room. Then 287, which is the character animation class, and then this class, which is animation interactivity from 4 to 640 in here. And yeah, that's the schedule. So you can find me in here pretty much all day on Mondays and Wednesdays. The class format here, if we were to look at this, on the schedule, the class is listed as in-person, and then there's a note in the schedule that explains the format of the class. And so the format of the class is not only in-person. This has what's called multiple attendance options. And so the class is happening here in this room in High Tech 134 on Mondays and Wednesdays from 4 to 6:40. This gets live streamed out to the class YouTube channel every time. And so there's people watching live online. And then for people who can't make this time work, it also gets archived on the channel for people participating asynchronously online. So it's very flexible in that way. Works for people who are able to be here in person, or people who can only carve out the time but can't be here in person, or people participating at a different time asynchronously. It's your responsibility to manage this. You can switch back and forth between any of the modalities as you see fit without notifying me. There's no official declaration of that. But this is very flexible for everybody. And I'm trying to achieve 2 things: maximum access to everything, and then that's really important for me in terms of this class and education in general being available to as many people as possible. Also, this class is not like other classes in English 101 or some other class where there's lots and lots and lots of sections, in that there's only one section of this class. This is it. You're in it. I'm the teacher. I'm the only person who teaches this class here. So it's not possible, given the current institutional resources, to have separate online sections and separate in-person sections of this class. 1, there wouldn't be enough enrollment, and 2, that wouldn't be available to everybody. So hence this format for these classes. It's the solution I've come up with to make things available for everybody and maximally flexible for everyone. So with that being said, if you can be here in person and carve out your weekly time and attention to be here from 4 to 6:40 twice a week, that is far and away the best way to participate in the class. Far too many students these days will opt out just simply opt out of not participating in anything in person, and I'd encourage you to reconsider that viewpoint. The quality of the education and the quality of the interaction and the quality of the experience is categorically, substantially, and demonstrably better in person. If I could say the class, if I could make it available to everybody but have everybody be here in person, that would be my preference. But it's really just not possible given the current landscape. So that's option A. Option B is everything is streamed live online, and so there's maybe not anybody there today because we're just announcing this. But when I'm streaming, I have OBS open, and people are responding in the chat there and I try to address those as quickly as I can when I see them, right? And then C, if you can't carve out the time at exactly this time, and you can't be here in person, time shifting the lecture that's recorded online is, asynchronous online option there. However, in the past, students have read this as, well, oh yeah, I can just take it as an online class. It's not a typical online class the way that a lot of other asynchronous online classes are presented, as a series of things for you to step through on Canvas at your own pace. That's not the way this class works. If that's what you're interested in for the asynchronous online experience, then this is probably not going to be a good fit for you. I've gone through a bunch of things in the way that I structure. I've done a bunch of work to make sure that the structure of the online class is as much like being in person as possible, because I think it's a better experience. And so this is in that style. We're in here talking about animation and interactivity and game design for 2.5 hours twice a week, and that is substantially different from a lot of other online class presentations, which again is kind of it can be something where it's work at your own pace, and that's not what this is. Regardless of the modality, you need to be able to carve out that amount of time every week in your schedule. That's your commitment in directing your time and intention towards this class every semester. So that being said, I know some students contacted me before the semester saying like, oh, can I take this class online? And in general, when I'm communicating with people in between semesters, I'm like, yes. And now that I have everybody's attention and everyone's watching, here's how that works. And so this isn't everyone's cup of tea. Those of you looking to have a different kind of asynchronous online experience, the way that some other online classes are run, this is not going to be that. I really keep everyone together working on the same projects every week as we provide feedback and present the work that we're doing each and every week here. So yeah, it's a substantial time commitment, but this is a major class for all of the degree programs, and so I think it works. The students who have taken this in the past seem to enjoy it, and everyone has said that they've learned a lot. So here we are. Does this make sense for everybody, what we're doing here with this? Okay, no questions? Okay, great. I know that some of you have heard this twice today. So because everybody's everywhere all at once, how do we talk to each other? We have a couple different ways of doing that. One, there's a class Discord. A lot of you guys are probably already on this already. There's a Digital Media Arts, Glendale Community College Discord server, and we have our own channel, AVC 200, on that server. And that's where, if we're not in class, like now, having this conversation, obviously being here now is the best way to ask questions. In fact, even if you're participating mostly live online or online, there may be instances where I'm like, hey, could you figure something out and try and be here on Monday or Wednesday? Because it's just much, much easier to answer questions and help people out in person than it is to go back in several hundred Discord correspondences. Discord is where I want everyone to channel all of their artistic and or technical questions, like, oh, I tried to do this and it crashed, or I couldn't figure out how to reverse the normals on this 3D model, or whatever it was. All of those questions go to Discord. Artistic questions like, does this really work in my game environment, or should I change this thing? Those questions go to Discord, right? All of that stuff gets funneled to Discord. If you have some sort of question or concern about your individual situation, like I'm sick, I'm having a family emergency, something like that, then send me an email, okay? But I try to silo these two things because obviously I'm teaching 3 other classes like this. There's a lot of online communication, and in the hopes of sort of keeping everything separate, I divide them out like this. Yeah, so that's that. with Discord. A lot of you already have this set up. We'll go over signing up for that in a minute. We keep to there's one project a week, pretty much. This very first week is a little bit different, just like all of your other classes. You got to take the syllabus acknowledgement quiz. There's the technology orientation thing to get all of your software installed by Friday. And so that's a little bit different. But as we move forward, we keep this weekly cadence of doing projects. And each block here in this graphic represents sort of the life cycle of one creative project. So on Mondays, it's me presenting pretty much the entire time about whatever new stuff is we're doing that week. Wednesdays are a combination of looking at the previous project, and if we have extra time, finishing up what needs to be presented with the current project. You turn in that project at 8 p.m. on Tuesday, and then the following Wednesday, we do a critique feedback session on everybody's projects from this cycle. And so this results in this kind of like overlapping pattern of, I end up starting to present the new project the day before you turn in the previous project. And so it creates this sort of like interlocking pattern of work over the course of the semester. Does that make sense so far? Okay. This, may seem a little bit cryptic, but you'll get the feel for it as we move forward throughout the semester. Some other things from the syllabus. This is all in the syllabus. I just put it up here on Miro. Where are we at? Here. What's happening each week? You'll be turning in usually some sort of file, whether it be a Unity project or a video clip or something, and then almost always there's a weekly presentation video where you're using OBS, like I'm using OBS right now, to sort of present whatever work you did that week. It's your opportunity to ask specific questions about what's going on with your project and have me answer them and have everybody else answer them. And then this is the way that we really come together as an entire class, right? Because there's some people who will only be online. There's other people who will be live online. There's other people who will be here. And on Wednesdays, you'll get to see everybody because everybody will be up on screen. I play back their video showing what they're doing, respond to that, you respond to that, and everybody gets feedback every week about what it is that they're doing and what it is that they're working on. And so this has worked really great in the past semesters in terms of being able to have people participate in these multiple different modalities, but also be able to form some sort of community of people who are all learning together. Does that make sense so far? Good? Okay, good. Let's see, back over here. Great, so part of that, let's go back over here one more time. Part of that aspect of the class is that you need to be comfortable sharing your work every week with the rest of the class. This has occasionally presented a problem for some students. If you're not okay with sharing your work with everybody else in the class on a regular basis, then this is probably not a great fit for you. We, on the graphic over here, I refer to this as our weekly critique session. This is just the word that is used in the art community for a feedback session. Just because it's called a critique doesn't mean we're all being critical. There's been some people who got hung up on that previously, right? We're just talking about whatever it is you did, how you could do it better, answering any questions about what problems you're having. In the past, they are always overwhelmingly positive. So that's not something to be concerned about. In terms of the semester schedule here, everyone knows we skipped Monday, right? So since the class has this modality, this MAL, multiple attendance options, and it's happening here right now in the room, in the class, on campus, we're off whenever campus is closed. So Monday, obviously, we will lose February 16th, which I believe is Monday, President's Day. We're obviously not here during spring break, which is the 16th, the week of the 16th. And then the last day of classes will be Wednesday, May 6th. And then we usually do our final presentation of our portfolio the Wednesday of finals week at the usual class time, right? So 4 o'clock on Wednesday, May 13th, which is just everybody sort of showing their final portfolio of work for the class. Does that make sense for everybody? Okay, great. It's an art class, and so we'll look at artistic examples, and this is going to be artwork with content that some people may consider controversial or offensive. I'm not just showing you things ad hoc. These are things that I've considered and I think are important to know about. And so in that context, be aware of that. But these artworks, the imagery in these artworks, the ideas and concepts presented in these artworks do not necessarily represent my views or the views of Coachella Community College or the views of Maricopa County Community Colleges. Keep that in mind. Required materials. So far and away, something I would recommend you have out and available to write in right now is a notebook. I strongly encourage you to take handwritten notes. I'll present some information later about the preponderance of scientific studies that have shown handwritten information is retained better than typed information or phoned information or whatever information. It helps you connect different modalities of experience across different regions of the brain and help you retain information better. I try to, write in a notebook as much as I can. Being my age, writing on paper was like the central tenet of my, certainly primary school and secondary school education. Whereas, now that may not have been the case for you guys. And I would encourage you, if that's the case for you, to maybe take this opportunity to explore that as a way to help you internalize information. Those of you, an external hard drive of some kind. A lot of you already have one. If you already have one that works and there's enough space on it, how much is enough space? I don't know, like 40 gigs or so, would be plenty for now. If you need to get a new one, as aspiring digital professionals, this is something that even if you have your own computer, having a secondary place to back up your information helps fulfill some sort of baseline level of data redundancy, right? Doing a bunch of great creative work, that's great. Not being able to find any of it or save any of it, or it all gets deleted, that's not good, right? So we'll talk about some of that stuff over the course of the semester, and having a separate external hard drive would be one of the strategies for backing up the data. We'll talk about computers in more detail here in a second. Two other things I would recommend here. Mouse, right? So especially if you're using a laptop, all the laptops have trackpads, obviously. But for doing a bunch of the 3D work in Unity and Blender, it's much, much easier with a mouse than trying to do a bunch of finger gymnastics to get the trackpad to do what you want. It doesn't need to be a nice mouse, just any simple USB mouse, as long as it plugs into your computer, would be fine, right? So even if you're bringing your own laptop to class each day, having a mouse to be able to do anything intricate it's just much, much easier. Related to that, in Blender, having the extra number pad keys on a keyboard is super useful. And so for those of you at home who have full keyboards with an extra numpad, that's great. It's something, again, some sort of super cheap Goodwill USB keyboard that just has the extra keys. You might find that useful at home or here. So that's certainly useful. Okay, make sense so far? Okay, let's talk about computers. So we do a bunch of work in this class, right? We're doing two things, animating and interactivity. What's a very popular thing that you all do that uses both animation and interactivity? Sure, any part of the computer, but more accurately or more specifically? Maybe I'm not, I guess I'm a terrible mime when it comes to it. No, video games, right? Gaming, right? Both animation and interactivity. So we cover all of the content about animation and activity, developing a couple games over the course of the semester. Last semester we made 2 games, which was super fun. And so we're focusing on that over the course of the semester. We're going to ask the computer to do a little bit more work than certainly you ask the computer to do in like English 101. So you need a tool that will work. We have some options. So on the home page, here, you're going to want a computer with a discrete graphics card. You know, having an NVIDIA graphics card would be great. If you have an AMD card, that's fine as well. If you're not sure what kind of card is in your home computer, this very, very short video about launching Task Manager can help you figure that out. A lot of you, anyone who does any gaming or streaming probably has configured a machine with a nice graphics card in it and you know you're good. In which case, great, you have a machine that's going to work for this class and you fall into option A here, right? You have a computer with an NVIDIA GPU. Does anyone have a Mac or working solely on a Mac? Okay, for this class in particular, the Mac is really not going to work because we're going to make a game that everyone can play. That presents a bunch of problems. And so the other thing that the institution has provided for, and that there's been a bunch of legwork in order to achieve, is that we have computers that you can check out, laptops, for free for the entire semester. So these are computers that, they're not incredibly awesome, but they're good. And if you fill out this form right here, ASAP, you can get on the list to borrow one of those computers for free for the entire semester. Not like borrow it from the library where you check it out and you got to return it in 2 weeks. You have it to use for the entire semester. And so that helps a lot, right? It's just that in this class in particular, we're making these games. Games are software, right? And so we sort of brush up against the topic of software development and doing that across platform from Mac to PC, while it's possible, ends up being a real hassle for the entire class as a whole. So that is something that we'll address here. So that's option B. Option C, some people, via either getting student aid money or they're thinking about, like, now I've committed to doing this, I want to have a better tool, what should I get? On Discord, I usually make a recommendation. It changes every semester, because the new stuff comes out. So I'll post something there. And then option D, look around. There's a lot of really good computers in this room. All these are new as of like last year, the year before. They're all really great. And so this room is available. When is this room available? TBA. I'm in here, as you saw, all day on Mondays and Wednesdays. So as you can see, the room is not jam-packed, right? And this is the case for the entire day, Mondays and Wednesdays. And so I can say for sure, if you want to come in and work, even though I'll be in here yammering about some other class, and work on these computers at any time on Mondays and Wednesdays, you are totally welcome to. And we'll work out, once I get some information from the rest of the teachers in this room, we'll work out when the room will be open at other times throughout the week, right? So we have a lot of great resources here. These are all really good computers. We've got our 2 like mega stations back there with the Wacom tabs, tablets, which are really, really great. Right, those big Wacom tablets are extremely nice. So keep this in mind. If you're going to check out a computer from the school, please fill out that form. ASAP. There we go. As long as I press the right keys. Because it takes them being the Office of Information Technology, the people just across the building over here, a little while to process that, and then they only hand them out at specific times. So if you're going to do that, please do that as soon as possible. So how many of you know you have a computer that's going to be able to hang? Okay, cool. But everyone has a plan here for how you're going to address this issue. Yes? Okay, good. Great. Okay, that's good. Let's see. What else did I want to call attention to? The grading in this class is fairly standard. All of our weekly assignments get averaged out to 75% of the grade. And then the final portfolio is the other 25. The final portfolio is essentially the presentation of all of the other work that you've done all during the semester. It's not like some brand new stuff you just concocted at the very end. And so the end final presentation ends up being hopefully not a complete stress fest at the end of the semester. Late work is accepted at my discretion. Discord. A lot of the rest of the syllabus is a lot of boilerplate stuff. This is all the terms of service and privacy policies for all of the software that we use. Throughout the course of the semester, we may use some machine learning or AI-based tools. In this class, there's not really any like writing assignments, so we kind of sidestep the idea that you're just going to have ChatGPT write your essay for you. But we may use some of the other tools, or I'll certainly talk about them and present them. It's becoming more and more a part of the industry, and there's a lot to say about this. In terms of using things, if you're using something off book or that we haven't talked about, just complete transparency. Like at this point, there's lots of different tools that do lots of different things, and I think specificity is key when having a conversation about artificial intelligence and machine learning. Like, what does this do? How was it made? How are you using it? These are all important things to understand, and if you do use something, just saying exactly that in the comments when you submit things on Canvas would be the primary way to address that at this point. Make sense? Okay, great. That's also good. I think that's everything we wanted to see here. Okay, what's due on Friday, the technology orientation. And so here you're just sort of getting signed up and downloaded all of the stuff that we're going to use. So Miro is like this online whiteboarding tool. You can use it for some note-taking. I'll have you use it here at the beginning. It's the tool I'm using over here for this part of the presentation. There's a bunch of other tools that do similar type things. I just happen to like this one. So those weekly presentation videos, you can get set up with OBS. Anybody do any streaming? Already have OBS set up at home? Yeah. So you've probably already got all of that working. The first thing you'll do with it here is get it set up and then do a presentation video where you introduce yourself to the class. And we're going to post that on Discord, our Discord channel. Now, when I say post that, I mean we'll post a link to it, because I am requesting and indicating that this video do not upload it directly to Discord. It's going to be almost certainly way too big for that. you can post it to your school YouTube account and then post a link to that in Discord. So part of this very first technology orientation assignment is you commenting on your fellow student introductions. And so if you can get your introduction up there sooner rather than later, that allows other people to actually comment on it before this is due Friday evening. Installing Blender, we're going to use Blender to make 3D things that go into the games. This is the link to install that. Yeah, we're going to use Unity primarily here, and I'll go over downloading that in a second. We also may use Unreal Engine. We have in some semesters. We didn't last semester. We'll see how we're doing. I keep it flexible. Most of you have already used Adobe Creative Cloud stuff with your Maricopa license. If you're not aware, you have a license to use Maricopa, to use the Adobe Creative Suite apps on your own computer, as long as you log in through your Maricopa account. This tutorial details doing that. If you're not sure about that and you haven't done it, do that soon, because in the past there have been instances where that didn't work because you weren't added to the list of people that have access to this. And so if that's the case, we need to find that out so that I can let the people, I don't have direct control over this. I need to let someone else know, and so that they can assign you to the list of people that have access to this stuff. Does that make sense? Okay, good. Great. And then here, for this one, you'll be uploading a JPEG of all of these, the proof that you've got all this stuff done in Miro, and then also an MP4 here. On Canvas, you can upload the actual MP4 file. On Discord, again, do not upload the actual MP4 file. Post to YouTube, post the link to it. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, it's a lot of stuff here. The other assignments throughout the semester are not going to be like this laundry list of junk to download. I just try to get it out of the way of the beginning so that, you know, everyone's set up, and then we can just sort of proceed and think about like what we're actually doing throughout the semester. But please take the syllabus acknowledgement quiz by tomorrow, and please get this done on Friday, by Friday. If you don't have anything there, I have to drop you from the class because they're being very, very, very strict about making sure that everybody is present in class the first week. There's been this really, really expanded scheme of fake students registering for class in order to somehow get financial aid money. And so when that happens, the institution is liable for those funds in some way. I don't understand the exact details. But anyways, it's happening way more than it used to happen. So please get that done so that if nothing else, the syllabus acknowledgement quiz. Syllabus acknowledgement quiz, very easy. One question. Did you read the syllabus? Right. And then you're good. Okay. I think that's all the stuff. Here's the YouTube channel. Everything, I linked to all of the lectures in the weekly assignment, but then things are also available here even before the assignment is posted on Canvas, right? I mean, they're here like as soon as it happens, right? Like as soon as I'm done streaming, it gets posted there. And so like these are the other lectures from this morning. So I label all of them that way, like class, title, date, and it all accumulates there. Notice that I'm not in the video section, I'm in the live section, right? Because that's where everything is there. There we are right now, live. Make sense to everybody? Okay, good. Great. Super. All right. So, yeah, Casey Farina, Dr. Casey Farina. You can just call me Casey. That's fine. I've been here like over 15 years. I've been residential faculty member for over 10 years. I've been doing this for a while. I teach AVC 200 every semester. So, gosh, that's been going on for a long time. and AVC 185 every semester. AVC 287, the character class, that's sort of every other semester, depends. So yeah, we've been doing a lot of this class. Of all the classes I've taught, this one sort of the curriculum shifts the most, which is fun. And yeah, now that we've settled in on sort of learning animation and interactivity through making some games, I think is really fun. Last semester, the students like really went to town. We made some very cool games. I'll show you some examples of those. Probably not today, but later. Yeah, it's been a very, very fun class. Yeah, I really enjoy doing this. This has been, like my main job for 15 years now, and it's been a lot of fun. So let's introduce ourselves. Name, obviously, your program, right? So what degree are you pursuing? And are you a GCC student? Because some students from other schools take classes at GCC and vice versa in order to satisfy their degree requirements. And then what's something you want to learn in this class? Great. All right. And we'll go over here first.
My name is
Hopeden? Hopeden. Okay. How do you spell it?
Hopedin.
Okay.
And the program I'm taking is animation and time-based media. And I am a student at GCC. Something I want to learn. I want to learn how to 3D model.
Okay. Yeah, we're gonna definitely cover some of that here. Right. There's a whole separate class. We have. You're in that, right, Max? Yeah. The morning class. I'll probably ask you that like 9 times, right? When people are in here throughout the day, I'm like, you're in that other class, right? We have a separate class, AVC 185, where we focus solely on that. But things being what they are, like it's hard to make much of anything without having 3D model stuff. And so we'll do some of that in here, but we won't be diving as deep into that as everything else. How many of you already have taken AVC 184, the Introduction to Computer Animation? Okay, yeah. Well, it kind of counts. You can half raise your hand. Just messing with you. Yeah, it's better to have that under your belt at this point, and then take this class. But if you're taking it concurrently, that works too. It's a lot of work taking both those classes in the same semester, so be prepared for that. Also, taking 2 of my classes in one semester is also like a commitment, so clear your schedule. In general, like the numbers were originally designed to be meaningful, right? Like you would take AVC 184 before you took AVC 185. However, we don't offer every class every semester. Students start at different times. Students take semesters off, right? Like the sequencing of things is, if we were to enforce that rigorously in terms of like hard prerequisites where I'm like, no, you can't do this until you do that one, everyone would be here for like 9 years, which, ultimately I don't think is in anyone's interest, right? So would it be nice if we had these very, very sequential, rigorous prerequisites? Perhaps, but yeah. So there's some overlap between the classes, but these are the cards we're dealt. Great. Okay, so Hopeden and Maya? Okay.
I'm getting my degree on like visual media arts. Basically, I'm here for like graphic designing.
Okay.
I'm a full-time student here, and something I want to learn is like basically like designing like the characters and like the scene.
Okay.
Using like lighting and color. Basically, what she said, like modeling.
Okay. Yeah, that's a solid strategy. Everyone can just do that the whole way around the room. Yeah, I'm interested in whatever that guy said over there. There, that thing. But this class is, when people sign up for it, it's like tends to be more obtuse. Where like animation, and like a lot of people have a hard time parsing exactly what does that mean? What are we going to do here, right? Because there's other classes where it's like this is animation. There's other classes where it's like, this is 3D modeling. Here, it's like, well, we're doing these two things. Because animation and interactivity is all over there, right? Being able to interact with something in real time. We'll talk about the technical parts of interaction, what that means for how we actually construct these things. So, Hopeton, Maya, and
My name's KJ. I'm in digital media arts. I am a GCC student, and I'm really into motion graphics for like concerts and stuff. So I want to learn more about that.
awesome, great. Yeah, some of the stuff that we do here can be applied to certainly in terms of like real-time VJing and motion graphics and being able to trigger things along with. And then a lot of my own personal practice falls along those lines. You know, I create music and art that goes together. And so a lot of things that are like that. So KJ, Maya, Hopeton, and Max.
Yeah, my name is Max. I'm in the time-based media program here. Something I want to learn, I guess I didn't know this was more about video games, but I love video game cutscenes. So maybe more Blender camera work,
Yeah.
Blender lighting, something like that.
Yeah. I mean, cutscenes are interesting in that, like, that's a moment where it's not as interactive, right? We're just sort of, those of us who are opting into that. My son just starts jamming the button whenever we get to a cutscene on something, and I'm telling you love cutscenes, but you fast forward through them. Yeah, I need to see the scene the first time, unless it's going to go on for like, like way too long. What was it that? I started Horizon Forbidden West and just like sort of tapped out at some point. There was just a lot. There was a lot of just yammering about whatever was happening there. At some point, I was just like, I just don't care anymore. I don't know what's happening.
Game heavily reliant on the context of the previous game.
Yeah, it seemed like that. I mean, the environment I was found really compelling. Like, it's really vibrant and beautiful, and the mechanical dinosaurs look awesome. Like, but then there's just like, all this, tribe this, tribe that, but it's just going on forever. Yeah.
The story is actually really interesting, but I guess you have to follow it from the first one main.
Yeah, I never played the first one, so like maybe it would have grabbed my interest there. Yeah. Also, like, my only time for gaming is like maybe at the end of the day once everyone else is in bed and like I'm maybe not completely exhausted, so my tolerance for extended explanation is very low at that point.
That's fair.
Yeah. Awesome. Max, KJ, Maya, Hopeton, and
I go by Punchy.
Benchy?
Punchy, yeah.
Bunchy or Benchy?
Punchy.
Punchy.
Yeah.
Punchy.
Yeah, it's like Animal Crossing.
Okay.
My degree is for video game production and game art.
Okay.
I mainly, like for this semester, I'm switching between PVCC and GCC.
Okay, great.
So I don't really know. I guess that counts as being a student here.
Well, I mean, where are you getting your degree from?
I think PVCC.
Okay. And on a related note, you might want to come to some clarity about that. Yeah.
I don't know a lot. Something I want to learn more about is weight painting.
Uh-huh.
I'm not really that good with weight painting and whatnot in Blender, and I'm wanting to get better with it all.
Mm-hmm.
I do like having to try and work with it, and I have been trying to experiment with it, but it's not usually like the way I really want it to be, and then just some complications arise or whatever.
Okay. Great. Punchy, Max, KJ, Maya, Hopeton, and
I go by Finch. It's not my legal name. I'm sorry. I'm weird. But
Me too, man.
my degree is digital media. I go to GCC exclusively. And I think I want to learn 3D modeling a little bit. It sounds scary, so I don't know. I didn't know this was all about like video game stuff.
so not everyone teaches AVC. Like at the other institutions, when people teach AVC 200, a lot of times they don't do it this way. But
I mean, I think it's a fun approach. I think it'll be interesting, but I just didn't expect it.
yeah. So we'll interact with code, but we're not going to sort of like write a bunch of code ourselves. So for those of you harboring some anxiety about that, take a deep breath, right? Like it'll be okay. All right. So Finch, Punchy, Max, KJ, Maya, Hopeton, and Montana.
Mine is applied science with an emphasis in digital media.
Mm-hmm.
I am a GCC student, and something I want to learn is like character design more.
Cool. Great. And
My name is Jana, and I'm also in digital media arts. I feel like everyone here is. I go here at GCC, and something I want to learn is I'd like to know more about animation because I feel like I haven't gotten a chance to learn it because it's very time consuming, and I don't let myself spend time on it.
mm-hmm.
I like to rush things, and I need to stop doing that. So that I can
Yes.
learn.
I would encourage you to make that change this semester. And yes, those two things are true. It is time consuming and it does, it's an activity that requires your complete attention and effort, right? So, and
So on the second time, I'm introducing myself today. First of all. My name is Alinka. I am a GCC student majoring in video game production. My main interest is being a specialist in feature design. I already know how to create features, and I'm just teaching myself rigging, so now I want to figure out how to edit.
awesome. Okay, great. So, Arlinka, Dana?
Oh, me?
Yes.
Jenna?
Jana, not a D, J. Arlinka, Jana, Montana, Finch, Punchy, Max, KJ, right? Yeah, Maya, and Hopeton.
You can just call me Hope. That's my first name.
Oh, okay. You rather have Pope?
Yeah.
Hope? Not Pope. Pope would be weird. So on that note, with names, I did not address this previously, and I want to. So on Discord, everyone in here probably already has a Discord identity. Yes. Okay. So I do not require you to make a separate Discord account with the school email. What usually works better is signing up for the GCC Discord with whatever Discord identity you usually use. However, the thing I would like you to do is change your server nickname for our server to the name you use in class. Okay, however it is that you want to be addressed, right? So that I have some way of knowing who I'm talking to on Discord, right? It's one thing for me to try and memorize everybody's names. It's another thing to try and memorize everyone's names and seemingly arbitrary Discord handles, right? So again, you don't have to change your name everywhere. This is the link for the instructions on changing your server nickname is like their technical name for doing that. Does that make sense for everybody? Okay, great. Also, about the presentation videos is I strongly encourage, but do not make it 100% required for you to put yourself in video on, have your camera on for the video, okay? Are some situations where I understand you really do not want to appear on camera for a variety of like legitimate concerns. However, for the majority of you, I would strongly encourage you to include your camera feed in your video. I go over doing that in the OBS tutorial, and allow me to make this point to you, right? I understand there's a generational gap between me and you, and my insistence on some sort of person-to-person connection and interaction. I've only ever hired and worked with people I knew in some sort of actual connected way, physical, and that may not be the case for everything going forward. However, for the beginning of your careers, you're certainly going to be working with or for people of my age who prioritize that perhaps in a different way than your generation might. So I might treat this class as an opportunity to develop my on-camera skill there in terms of like presenting myself during these presentation videos. I'm not saying you need to dress up every week or look great or anything like that, but just get used to speaking to the class, being on camera, explaining yourself in a professional way, right? I went into this in the morning in both classes. I'm sorry for those of you hearing it multiple times, is that the world is not a meritocracy. It's not just the people who are really good at the thing who get hired. A lot of students come into various creative endeavors thinking that like, well, that's most of it, right? If I'm really good at X or Y, and then I do a little bit of work networking, like I can, that'll do it. And that does not seem to be the reality of our world anymore, right? The being connected, knowing who else is working, being able to establish connections and communication with them, communication skills, I think is more along the lines of like maybe half of doing this kind of work, right? You should obviously be good at what you're doing, make images and animations that you're proud of, obviously, right? But if you want to work professionally and have people pay you to do these kind of things, then being able to properly communicate with them in a convincing and meaningful way is a big part of the job, right? I mean, a lot of the, besides becoming an independently wealthy and famous artist who does whatever they want, and if you figured out the pathway to that, let me know, because I'm also interested in that endpoint. But you're going to be working for other people who have hired you to make a thing, and a lot of making a thing for someone else is understanding them and communicating to them that you understand what it is they want, how it is they want this thing to be, what it is they want to accomplish, with whatever creative thing it is that they've hired you to manifest. So that's my rant here about turning on your camera in your weekly video. When you do that, I would ask that you put your video over here on the other side, right? I'm always over here. That's the way I have mine set up on the screen right. If you go over on screen left, that makes it much easier when I play them back in class, because like you're over there and I'm over here. If you also take the lower right-hand corner, then when I play the video back, I'm like on top of you in like a really weird and awkward way. That just makes it like kind of strange. So the other corner tends to be better. Does that make sense for everybody? Okay, great. And yeah, I've said my piece about that. Again, it's not 100% required. It is just highly encouraged. Great. Anything else here? I don't think so. We did all the introductions. We got everybody going. It is 5 o'clock. Okay, I think we're in a good position to get something done. So let's do it. Let's come back over here. It's one class. This one. Okay. What software, what tools are we gonna use in this class? Our main tool is going to be the Unity game engine. Okay, so this is sort of like the end of our pipeline. We'll use some other tools, but why am I insisting that everyone learn yet another thing, right? What does Unity offer that other that Blender does not, for instance? Here, we are authoring real-time experiences. So this is the key word in what separates Unity from Blender, right? In Blender or After Effects, you have a timeline. You're setting stuff out on that timeline. Those things play back in some sort of order at some sort of frame rate. And then at the end of the day, you get a movie file, right, of your animation. That's the case for, I'll use Blender and After Effects as like the primary examples because most of you are familiar with both of those, right? What does Unity offer us? Unity offer us the ability to make something that is going to be interactive in real time, meaning that instead of the experience playing front to back in a linear type way, right? So Blender, After Effects, you're authoring linear media. You hit play, and then you sit back or skip and just watch the entire experience, right? Unity is non-linear, right? Video games are non-linear. That's what makes them games. The user is asked to make some kind of decision, and then that affects the way everything plays out in the game to some extent, right? Some games more, some games less, depending on the structure of the game or the type of game, right? This is all, I'm sort of laying out the basis here, but this is all sort of intuitively obvious, right? One of the ways that we do it in video games is just, pressing a button, right? Did you press the button or did you not press the button? That decision can result in a whole bunch of different things happening in the game. Also, like, not only did you press or not press, but when did you press? Was this thing there? Was that thing there? Where was something else on screen? All of this stuff, non-linear. So with that in mind, in order for it to be non-linear, we are doing, what are we outputting from here, from Unity? Instead of Blender, where we get an MP4 file, right, some sort of movie file at the end of the day, here we are getting software. We're going to have an application at the end of our process. And this, is something that you'll load on. In our case, we're going to be directed solely at making a, like Windows app game that you can play on most Windows machines, right? And so this is software development. This ends up, by nature, this ends up being a little bit more complex than just making a movie file, right? Making a movie file can be complex enough, right? Blender is a complicated, complex environment. There's lots of intricate things in there. But in order to do software development, there's, a lot more intricate stuff to happen in order to author this application, all right? The good news is the tools for doing this are, this tool in particular has progressed exponentially just even over the course of me teaching this class, right? Maybe about 2 years into me teaching this class, we used to use a separate programming environment. I switched it over to using Unity, and the ability for students to make interesting, compelling, interactive experiences has just continuously ramped up over the course of my career. Like, the tools are just that much better. It's more and more accessible to everybody. And it's never been better than it is now. But there certainly is the capacity for you to have problems, of course, right? Everybody will have problems over the course of the semester, but that's why we're working in Unity. So Unity is also free for you to use for personal use. Their license is such that you can download it and use it for free and author games. And then the way that they offer it for free is that if your game or whatever you make with Unity ends up grossing more than $100,000 a year, then they ask you to pay some sort of percentage of that. In my years of teaching, that has not happened yet, where someone made $100,000 by the end of the semester. So, maybe this is the year. Who knows? We'll see. I feel like if one of you made $100,000 over the course of a week during the semester, the chances of me seeing you again in class would probably be pretty low at that point, right? That sounds like a lifestyle-changing amount of money for most of you, I'd imagine, and it would change your, certainly decision-making about school a lot more. But jokes aside, Unity, for the most part, I really like. It tends to be a little bit more open conceptually. The other software that does this, anybody know about game dev? What's another popular platform that people use? Unreal Engine, yeah. And in the past, we've done like a Unity game at the beginning, an Unreal game maybe at the end. I don't know. We'll see how this semester goes. Unreal Engine, there's a lot. Just downloading and getting it going on your machine is a higher bar for your machine to clear, whereas Unity is a little more forgiving there. So we'll see how it goes. This part of my focus on Unity here is just that the freedom it allows for student game devs to sort of come up with things. It seems a little bit more, people get more done quickly than in Unreal Engine for this first semester. We'll also use Blender. In our case, we're primarily using Blender to create 3D models, right? And so just if we were to look at this here, when you do this kind of work, what I would write down is that most often there is a pipeline. And this is a chain of programs or environments that you're using to produce your media, whatever that is. And part of doing this kind of work on a professional level is determining what your pipeline needs to be. Wouldn't it be great if there's one program that did all this stuff? Yes. Has that ever been the case since I've been doing this? No, right? Just there's too many different things. A lot of programs try to do that, but it's not quite there, right? And so something like in Blender here, we'll be primarily concerned with Blender for making the actual mesh models of things that are in 3D. Sometimes those can come out and be painted in Substance Painter. We'll probably use that over the course of the semester. And then they would come back over here into Unity so that then the interactivity could be programmed. The actual animation and movement of things can happen a couple of different places, and you'll sort of get a feel for that over the course of the semester. There could be things that are animated in Blender and then put into Unity, or there could be things that just come over here to Unity and then the animation happens here. But again, this is the end of our pipeline, and so there's other programs that are doing some work that are then putting this into here. Right, so this is important to understand. Unity itself isn't a drawing program, isn't a modeling program, and so you're not directly creating visual assets in there the way we work. So your other skills for creating visual assets, whether they be 2D or 3D, drawing, Photoshop, Procreate, what app are you using? Yeah, Procreate. All of that stuff is on the table, right? Those apps all exist sort of up here, and they could be things that come in. Either you draw something in Procreate that then you model in Blender, or perhaps it's something that comes in its 2D form. Just because it's 2D doesn't mean it couldn't exist as a cardboard cutout type thing in a stylized 3D world, right? So keep all of that in mind here. I'll try to show a bunch of options as we continue throughout the semester, but yeah. So that's kind of our pipeline. Today, we're going to focus over here. So we're just going to sort of like start and end in Unity in order to, this is the one, I mean, how many of you have opened and done something in Unity ever? Okay, good. Some people have some experience. So a lot of you don't. Usually it's not many people in the class who have previous experience with this. And so here, we're just going to focus on that part of it today, right? Today, we're going to try and going to compress it, but we're going to try and do both things. We're going to animate something and then make it interactive. So we'll have checked off both parts of the title of the class. Make sense?
Did you say today?
Yeah, today.
Should we download it then?
No, not right now. Yeah, because that takes a minute, and that's about what I'm going to talk about next. Okay, so what are we on here? if you download it now, if you go to download Unity, you'll need to make a Unity account, right? And so over here, and you'll need to, when you sign up for a Unity account, you want the personal. Everyone write that down, okay? Because one of the options, and they change this around, will stay student, okay? No, not student, personal. In order to give the student license, it's sort of administered through the institution, and we don't have that set up. You just want the personal one, okay? The personal one will be what you want. Which email should I use when I'm setting this up? Doesn't matter to me, one that you remember, okay? So if you want to use your Maricopa account and set up your password that way, that's fine. You can also use another account. That's fine. As long as you can log in, that's the important part, okay? And then Unity is one of these programs, like most of them now, where there's a launcher, meaning that you download a thing, and that launcher is called Unity Hub. And then from Unity Hub, you can make new projects, and then you can also download different versions of Unity. Both of those things happen, and so you download Unity Hub first, and then you can make new projects and download different versions. Everybody with me there? Okay. And so that's here. If you click on this, if you download for Windows, Unity Hub looks like this. Okay, so once you download Unity Hub, it's a fairly simple-ish. Yours may look slightly different. Yours won't have a bunch of junk here. This is previous projects that I have on this computer. And if your initials are not over here, that means you need to sign in to Unity Hub so that it has your credentials that you made on the Unity website. Is that clear for everybody? This is, you've probably done a bunch of things that work in a very similar fashion there. Great. Okay, so then installs here, or no. Yeah, yours will also be empty because you will not have, there won't be anything there. You haven't downloaded anything. If you go to install editor here, yeah. So here, we're going to use this one. Let's say this one to start. So, or no, there's that thing. So let's say here, right? So this is the part that's always squirrely. Again, some of you have already heard me make this joke today. The good news is they're improving Unity all the time. The bad news is they're improving Unity all the time, right? So the versions change. It's constantly a difficult thing with all my classes in terms of like slight differences that result in something not working. So 6.3 LTS, anyone know what LTS stands for? LTS is long-term service. And so programs that change often, which is everything now, everybody is up against what I just described, right? You're working, you update, and now the thing doesn't work, right? In order to try to avoid that, not guarantee you avoid that, but to try to avoid it, all of the companies have what they call LTS versions, which means we're going to improve the program up into this point, and then once we're confident that it's like pretty good and not a mess, we're going to say this is the LTS version. And then you're invited to use that version, which is kind of like frozen in time. So we're not going to mess with that one. We're going to continue to make new ones, and then you can jump on that train later if you want. But yeah. So Hope, I wouldn't try to download it now, right? That's all set up there. And another thing, especially here for the lectures at the beginning, especially for new information, I highly, highly, highly recommend watching, absorbing, taking notes, forming your mental model the first time through. That's why I record all this stuff. Then later you go back and sort of work along. But working along the first time, I think, makes it really hard to absorb, understand what you're doing, right? Because it's kind of like driving a car in the dark, like no headlights dark. where you're like, okay, I think I'm doing what this guy is saying, but I don't know where we're going. If you see the breadth and direction of the entire project before you go in there and start doing your thing, especially when it's a new thing, I think it helps. I think it's better, especially here at the beginning. Everybody with me there? Okay. So you'll need to download this one. And then the other important issue here at the beginning is that do not make a new project. Okay? This is perhaps counterintuitive. Especially, we'll probably do this throughout the entire semester, is that, again, like I said, we're up against a type of software development. And so because of that, there's a lot of config here in terms of like, in order to do some work, some things need to be set up, some boxes need to be checked. A lot of that stuff is not, it's stuff that changes all the time. It's not incredibly important to the content of this class. And I've done a bunch of work to try and clear the table for you, right? So that you can sit down and actually make something, so that we don't have to spend the first week talking about how to configure your Unity project and not doing anything interesting, right? So here, I'm in, what is a Unity project, right? And so a Unity project is a folder, and inside that folder there are more folders. And so this is different from Photoshop or Blender, right? Where it's a neat file, right? Save, and now I have a blend file. Save, and now I have a PSD file. Again, we're developing software here, so it's a folder, and inside that folder is a bunch of stuff, okay? And in order to move the project around and access that project, you need to bring the entire folder with you, not just one file. Everybody understand? Okay, so with that in mind, how do I give you a project? As a zip file. So I will have taken an entire project and zipped it up into a single zip file. You'll download that zip file, unzip it, and then tell Unity to open said project, okay? So you need to unzip. This, for those of you maybe not as familiar with this idea, this is where people run into problems sometimes, is that they try to have Unity open the zip file. That's not gonna work, right? Because it's a compressed thing. You need to unzip it into the folder with a bunch of other folders and then tell Unity, here's my project, okay? So unlike Photoshop and other things, we're not making a new project this week. We're starting with a project that I've configured for you and is ready to go. Okay, there's more to say about that. How do I then, once you download the LTS version, then here under projects, how do I actually open this thing? Okay, so there's a lot of rigmarole here. You gotta trust me, I've cut this down as much as I can to try and get to doing something, okay? And so add, so over here, you'll be tempted to press this button. Don't do that, okay? Not that one. Over here under add, click, and you'll want to add project from disk, right? Meaning that it's on your disk in the computer. So over here, add project from disk, and then mine is in the downloads folder. You should probably move it out of there. So here's another little issue. Let me show you what a Unity project looks like. Here, okay, so this is the general structure of a Unity project, okay, inside a folder. There's a bunch of stuff here. You don't need to pay attention to any of it. What I would just write down in my notes is that this folder is the only one that you'll need to deal with, right? Assets. That's where everything that you make ends up in assets, and you can easily identify a Unity project on your Finder by, like, if you open a folder and there's a bunch of junk and there's an assets folder, that's probably a Unity project, okay? And so the key thing here is that when you open it up in Unity Hub, what folder do you tell it to open? You tell it to open the folder above assets. Above assets, okay? So the folder that this assets folder is in. It's important to understand that because this can get a little bit confusing or messed up perhaps when you zip stuff, right? Because you zip it, it puts it in a folder. Sometimes it puts that folder in a folder. And so you could have a couple layers of folders there. And if you're a couple layers off, it won't open it. So for instance, this folder here with assets, I go up one. Okay, and so this is the folder that is the Unity project, okay? And so if I told it to open this one, I could open it. I'm not going to do that. I already have mine open over here because the first time you do this, do not be afraid. It may take a couple minutes for it to do all the stuff. The first time you set up a project, all those other folders, there's a bunch of stuff in there, and it needs to do a bunch of things to configure all that stuff. So the first time you open a project, you'll be like, man, this takes forever. The next time you open it, it should go much, much faster. You'll be able to open and close pretty quickly, okay? So the problem here is this. So I'll go up one more level here. And so this is not the folder that's one level above assets. And if I told it to open this, you'll get this. Project failed to open. This project is not valid, okay? This is the message you get if you're just not pointed at the right folder. And almost always, it just means like you're one level too high there. Does that make sense for everybody? Maybe another way to look at it over here would be project from disk. No, it won't do the nested thing. Okay. Okay, and then once you do that, your project will appear here, and then in the future, when you open it up again, you just need to launch Unity Hub and then click on the project, and it'll open it up. You won't have to do, all of this is just getting it set up the first time, okay? And again, I've tried to smooth the runway as much as possible here to get everything set up. If I could make it even simpler, I would, but it's kind of where we're at with this. Everybody with me? Okay, so those are the major gotchas that people usually run into at the beginning. Once you open it, once you open the project that I hand off, you'll be here in Unity. So let's look at what we got here. You'll notice that this, shouldn't look crazy. Looks kind of like Blender, right? In that we've got some stuff over here. We got some stuff over here. We've got an inspector that tells you about the stuff that you selected. Over here, these are all the game objects that we've got here. This is kind of like the outliner in Blender. Like these are all the things in the game at this point. And then down here, we have the assets. So all that stuff in that assets folder, that's this stuff right here. And we don't need to deal with too much of that right now. We'll learn about this as we go along. But yeah, so we're here. Okay, so far so good. Let's move it along a little bit. So there's different, so you have a Unity project, and inside a Unity project, you can have different, or you can have, let's say, many scenes. A scene is essentially, it'd be good to think of it as a level right now, right? And certainly if you make a multi-level game, each level is most often a separate scene, okay? So a scene's like a game, an area in the game environment in which you can put stuff that does things, right? And you can have many different scenes. Usually, if you're, again, it's just a folder with stuff in it, and so you can organize it as you see fit. And I would encourage you to stay organized, right? So usually there's a folder called scenes, and that's where you want to put all the scene files so that it just stays organized. Unity, it's not like Unity won't work if you don't do that. It'd just be a lot easier to work if you keep it organized. Okay, so for instance, here under scenes, there's one scene here. It says bouncing ball example. If I double click on that, I already had it open, but I'll say open, and here we are. So we're here. Great. And scenes have this Unity icon. The Unity icon's that cube thing. So that's what a scene is. As we look over here, there's a bunch of stuff. Okay, let's go about the interface. Down here, these are the assets. And so looking at what's going on down here is just like looking at that folder in the file browser. It's exactly the same. This is a file browser down here, which means that when you delete something from assets, it is gone. It is like deleting it on the computer. So especially here at the beginning, like, don't delete anything from the assets. Just, it won't hurt anything if you have extra stuff there for the most part. And so just leave it there. This is a little bit different from Blender. Like if you delete an object, you could Control Z and get it back, right? Here, this means you're like deleting that file. And so then it's gone. Yes?
There's no like extra window, like for Windows, like operation system being like, are you sure you want to delete this?
Yeah, I think it does. I think it does do that. Yeah, it should say like, hey, you sure about that? I don't want to test that right now and derail everything, but yeah, I'm pretty sure it does do that. And so essentially looking at these folders here is the same as coming over here, here, and looking at the material, all the stuff here, right? This is the exact same. Maybe there's a few extra files. The other thing to be aware of here is that you'll see a lot of this kind of stuff where you're like, what is all this extra junk with .meta in here? And those are exactly what they say they are. They're called meta files. That's a file where Unity stores information about another file. You don't have to touch those, okay? Like it manages all of that information. And over here, you won't even see them. It won't show them to you. But in the file browser, they'll show up over there. But you can just stay away from that for now. Up here, these are game objects, right? So these are things that are in the game. A lot of stuff that you should recognize, right? There's a camera, there's a light, volume, here's a 3D plane, right? Stuff in a scene. And these function like regular objects. If you delete them, you can bring them back with Control Z. In fact, during the course of the game, some things may be added and some things may be deleted up here. It just depends, right? You know, like these reset as the game progresses. Then over here, the difference in these two views, one, scene. This is where you work, right? So the scene view is where, you know, you're reaching in there and moving trees around and moving, like saying the character should start over here and there should be some enemies here and whatever it is that you're doing, right? This is where you do your work. Different from Blender in that this has the Alt key navigation. So those of you who've worked with any other program besides Blender, it's the way most of other programs work, is that you hold down Alt left to orbit, Alt middle to grab and move the camera, and Alt right to zoom in and zoom out. And the scroll wheel also zooms in and zooms out like it does in Blender. So you just got to get used to that, right? Sort of switching back and forth. The first couple weeks, it may be a little painful, but then once you sort of internalize your muscle memory on both things, it's fine, right? So could you change the hotkeys so it's exactly the same as Blender and you wouldn't have to deal with that? Yes. If you want to do that, go ahead. But like in general, I don't do that just to make sure it's just a little bit more accessible. Okay, and so like I said, you do your work over here, and moving the camera around here is just so you can see what you're doing, okay? Over here, this is the game view, and this is what the player sees. Okay? And so this is essentially the view from the camera over here. And in order for that to change, something needs to happen to the in-game camera. And so over here, I can't click on stuff and do anything. Over here, I can select something and move it around. And you see that it's moving on the right-hand side because it's moving relative to the camera. If I come over here and select the camera, like over here, click on it. And if I were to select the camera and drag it left and right, you see that the view for the player is changing. We're doing something pretty simple this week, so the camera's just going to stay put. In the future, you can attach the camera or make it a child of an object that you move around the scene, and then you've got like a first-person view of the scene as you move it around there. So over here, you can't click on stuff. Over here, you can. Inspector is fairly self-explanatory. This just shows you the options for whatever it is you have currently selected over here for whatever game object you currently have selected. Remember, the objects up here in the scene, these are game objects. The things down here, these are assets. So in general, what I would write down in my notes is that you use assets to build game objects, right? So you could model a mesh in Blender. You could draw a ping in Procreate, bring that in as an asset, either an OBJ or a PNG file, and then you use that OBJ or PNG file to make a game object that displays that ping or displays that object file. Does that make sense? The game object hierarchy is that you have a game object, and then on game objects, we have what are called components. And so components give your game object different powers, right? They could give it physics, or give it a collider, or make it render differently. All sorts of different stuff that we'll talk about over the course of the semester, right? So game objects have components, and components are the things that we see in the inspector, right? So just as a quick example, here's the main camera. Over here, you'll notice that it has a few things. If I can fold it up so we can see a list. It has the transform component, which is just essentially the component for storing transform properties, position, rotation, and scale in space. It has the camera component. That's what makes it a camera object. It has the audio listener, which is actually kind of like our ears in the game. We'll talk about that more later. And then this thing. So anytime you see this, this is a piece of code. And in Unity, these individual pieces of code are called scripts. And scripts essentially allow us to make our own components that do whatever it is that we want to do to the object. And like I said, we're not going to be writing these from scratch. I have an entire game dev system that I have in place that will use that together with these things. But you should know this, is that Unity's code is in C#, right? That's the programming language that's used to write Unity scripts. So keep that in mind, right? Sharp or #sharp for those musicians out there, right? The sharp sign. Everybody understand so far? So we got components. If we were to look at the plane, let's look at the components on the plane. It is the transform component. This stores the position, rotation, and scale of the plane. The plane mesh filter. This essentially just stores the mesh data for the plane. The mesh renderer, right? What does the word render mean? Even simpler. Just to draw, right? Render is to draw, and in our case, we're just drawing on the screen, rendering on the screen, right? So this, you can have the mesh filter, which is just the mesh data, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you would see it. The mesh renderer makes it visible in the game. It renders it, right? I can turn this component off with the checkbox, and you see that it's still there in the game, but it's just invisible. We can't see it, right? And you can use things like this to your advantage if you wanted to create like an invisible barrier to make sure people don't like, fall off the cliff in this part of the game unnecessarily or whatever, right? Stuff like this. Yeah.
Interesting fact, the original Doom game,
Uh-huh.
it looks like it's rendering 3D frames, but it's just a trick of light. It's actually 2D. You're actually busy playing a 2D game,
Yeah.
and it's a visual illusion that it's in 3D space.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff, especially about that first Doom game. The I'll try to remember to post the podcast on Discord, but Lex Friedman, who I listen to occasionally, did a wonderful interview with John Carmack, the developer, one of the two developers on the original Doom. That was fascinating, really, really good. He talks about that, because, when does that game come out? 90.
Wasn't it 1886? Oh, 1986, I mean.
That sounds early. I mean, I was playing Doom in college. I'm not in college in 1986.
Dark Ages is absolutely awesome, by the way.
I haven't had a chance yet. 1993.
That was close. Close enough.
Yeah. Anyways, I'll try to post a link to that. But yeah, I mean, when they make the original Doom, he's not using Unity, right? It's a much more arduous situation there. I mean, that essentially those two people are rewriting or writing an entire game engine from scratch in order to run the game. It's, a much heavier lift at the time. Yeah. So, yeah, mesh. These are all the components. The last component here is a material on this, right? So for those of you who've worked in Blender, the structure is very similar here. We have a mesh, and then in order to change the color of the mesh, we have a material that you can change the color of in order to change the appearance, right? So the separation between the shape of the thing, the mesh, and then the way that shape is rendered, which is primarily controlled by the material, okay? So with that in mind, yeah. Okay, let's animate something. Where are we at here? 5:30. Okay, we're doing pretty good on time. Okay, so is there anything else I want to say about the new? Oh, yes. Make a new thing. Okay, so up here under plus, here I can make new game objects, right? And so, like I said, in the future, we'll be bringing stuff in from Procreate, from Blender, into assets, bringing those in. We're not going to do all of that today. We're just going to use some shapes to just experience animation and interactivity. And so, over here, this weird bug. Whenever I press this, it shows up on my other monitor, unless I move this. Okay, anyways, here, 3D object, we'll go with our friend the sphere and bring in a sphere, and then I'll make this bigger again. Here we go. And so now I have a sphere, and a couple things. You'll notice it again has the transform. If I can unfold that, you can see everything here. Mesh render, this is a collider, which is important. We'll get to that later. And yeah, so one of the first things is that you may notice is that when we just make a new thing from just saying, hey, new thing, it kind of puts it at a rather arbitrary location. And so something I like to do is come over here to these three dots under the transform and say reset. And that sort of moves it back to 0, 0, 0, 0 rotation, 1, 1, 1 scale. So it just kind of resets it so it's not in some weird space. Great. Over here, for those of you who were in this morning, again, what I said is accurate. And so the colors of the axes are the same as Blender. And so not Arlinka. What is blue? Blue is which axis? The X, Y, or the Z? Not you. You're
Not me.
yeah, you've been
I just heard
you've been banned from answering. That's a good thing. All right. So what about green? Very good. And red. X. Right. So the good news is this, like I said, is the same in all of the programs. Once you learn this, you're good to go. The bad news is that what direction is up here? Up away from the plane. Y, okay? And so for those of you coming from Blender, this is different. In Blender, what direction is up? Z, okay? So this is the unfortunate world we live in, where what direction is up changes from program to program, right? I know it, especially when you're learning this coming in clean, the idea that that is the case seems absolutely preposterous, and I would agree with you. Yes, it does seem absolutely ridiculous, but it's what we have, right? No one, I don't know, I guess it's like no one wants to change what they have. I mean, it's a complicated issue. Anyway, so the colors are the same, but what direction those arrows point is different. It's important to keep that in mind. Okay, great. And so our keys here to move things around, slightly different than Blender. WER are going to be our keys, our shortcuts here to select between the move, rotate, and scale tools. You could also come over here and just click these buttons. That would do it. And so the visual language remains the same from Blender. And so when you're moving, we get the little arrows over there. If you're rotating, you get the circles. And when you're scaling, you get the cubes there to scale things, right? So similar, but a little bit different. Allows you to manipulate things over here. Does this make sense for everybody so far? Okay, and again, notice that I'm manipulating things over here, and they're just happening over here. I can't do anything over here for right now. So let's keep going. We've got that in place. Let's create some, let's give it a color. And so in order to change the color of this sphere, we need to give it a material. You'll notice that there is a material down here, and it's gray. We also notice it's grayed out. That means this is just kind of like the default. We haven't assigned a specific material to this object, right? And we can do that. So let's come over to our materials folder just for the sake of staying organized. And so now we're going to make a new material. A material is going to be an asset, right? It's essentially stored in a file that represents all the material settings. And if we right click here, again, it's opening up in the other window. If we right click here, you can say create, and we can go to material. That creates a new material. I'm going to call this blue and do that. And so how do I assign blue to this sphere? You can just drag from here to there, or drag from here to here. Notice that blue is not blue. Why is that the case? Because we haven't actually clicked on the material. When you click on the material, the inspector changes to, the material settings, right? And so we can come over here and say that, yeah, this blue material is indeed blue. There we go. Now it makes a little bit more visual sense, right? And so a couple different ways to apply materials, right? You can drag them from here over to there, or in the mesh renderer under materials, there's this slot for the material. And so if I were to drag white into there, I changed white to red, which is unnecessarily confusing, but now it's red, right? If I drag blue back over there. The other way to do it is this little target. If you click on that, it shows you all the materials in your project, and you could just pick one. That's probably what I do most of the time to change these things. And let me change white back to white so that this is not obviously problematic. Okay, good. So we made an asset, and then we applied that asset to the game object via the renderer component, right? So knowing the vocabulary is just going to help you be able to read the documentation about what's happening. Anytime you make a change, this asterisk is telling you that you need to save the scene, right? So when you press Control S in Unity, you're not saving the whole project. The whole project is always, the project, they're just files sitting on the computer, right? Anytime you change them, they're automatically saved. They're just in that folder. When you press Control S, you're saving the scene file, which is this file right here. And once you do that, you'll see that the asterisk goes away, and we have that there. Okay, great. So we made this ball. Okay, so the first part of the class, animation. Can we make this ball bounce? Down here, let's just call attention to this real quick. And so if you're getting red or yellow language down here, this is some kind of error. Yellow is more of like a heads up, like, hey, there's a thing here and there's a bunch of other stuff and you may want to take a bit care of this later. If something comes up in yellow, for right now, you can just sort of like just ignore it, okay? We can talk about all of these later. Red is going to be an error that will keep the game from going into play mode, which is going to be more of a problem. We shouldn't do anything today where we're going to get red, hopefully. Sometimes this can be a little bit confusing. So anyways, the errors show up down here, but then if you go from project to console, console is what I would write down in my notes is where Unity talks back, right? So if it's having a problem, this is where it tells you about it, right? And like, okay, well, something's wrong and we got a problem here. Hopefully for this week, we can steer clear of that. We're not going to do anything dicey and we should be fine. If you have stuff popping up in yellow, a lot of times it just has to do with them updating things and it's not mission critical stuff right now. Okay, you should be able to continue on. And if you really don't like seeing it, you can press the clear button and that'll sort of make it go away from now. It may pop up again later, but if it's in yellow, again, just whistle through the graveyard. You don't need to worry about it. Everybody with me? Great. Okay. So, okay, good. Let's address this. So up here, this is where we can put the game into play mode. And so up until now, I've just been in editor mode. I'm just doing stuff, configuring things, moving stuff around, making new stuff, all that kind of thing. Play mode means that I'm going to simulate the game. We're going to throw all the stuff that's supposed to happen that we've set up to happen during the game is going to happen. And so this is where we do that. So here, allow me to draw something to your attention. Okay, watch this. I'm going to go into play mode. Notice that everything turned red. I'm going to talk about that in a minute, not right now. But right now our game doesn't really do anything. So it's just kind of sitting there. We'll make it do something in a second, right? But I'm in play mode. I can still come over here and select things in the editor. But if I were to move one of them like that, or if I were to come over here and like delete this sphere like this, now I go out of play mode. I'm going to hit stop. Watch what happens. It returns to where it was before. Let that sink in for a second and then think about it. So when we're playing the game, stuff happens, right? When Mario kills that first Koopa by jumping on it, you don't delete it forever. The next time you play Mario 1-1, that Koopa's back there waiting for you to jump on it again, right? And so while this situation that changes you make during play mode do not stick, can be frustrating for new people here, right? But when you sit back and think about it, of course, you don't want people to permanently alter the game while playing the game. Yes, I know there's games of permadeath and all these other kind of things, but that's not what we're doing here, right? Most of the time, that's not the case. Yes?
Sorry, but the first enemy in Mario is a Goomba.
It's a Goomba. I know. As soon as it came out of my mouth, right? It's not a turtle. It's the mushroom guy. It's a Goomba, not the other guy.
It
Yes.
would have driven me insane not to.
Yes, it's a Goomba. You don't permanently kill that Goomba the first time you jump on it, right? Next time you come back, it's there again. So write that down. Digest that for a minute, right? Because this is structurally different than working in Blender. right? So the way this is a problem is that students go into play mode and they start playtesting the game, then they leave it in play mode and start doing a whole bunch of work, right? Like I'm going to move some trees around and then build a lake or import a car or whatever it is, right? But then they're like, oh, I'm in play mode. And so then when I hit stop, everything reverts back to whatever it was before you hit play, right? There's a handful of ways around it, but in general, you just want to be more vigilant about not working when it's in play mode, okay? And so that red tint that happened in the screen, let me show you where that is. So edit, because you'll need, I can't make this part of the file. This is part of your Unity install. So you need to change it in your preferences. So over here under preferences and under colors and under play mode tint, you notice that I've changed mine to some sort of an obnoxious color that I am not going to not notice, right? By default, Unity has it set to something like that, so that when you enter play mode, it's like slightly darker than it was before. And it makes it very easy to forget that you're in play mode, right? And so, especially here the first day, coming over and going to preferences, colors, play mode tint, and changing it to something very obvious visually makes it much, much easier to realize, like, okay, I need to exit play mode and then continue working on the game. Any questions about that? Right? When you think about it, yeah, it makes plenty of sense, right? You don't want to have the player permanently changing the landscape of the game when the game is happening. And that's when you're working and you're in play mode, that's essentially what's happening, right? Because you can do it in the editor, like add things, delete things, change things, but occasionally in the game, that can happen as well. Like Minecraft, you can run around and make new stuff, right? It's a more complicated issue with saving the environment and everything else. But yeah, so a little heads up there that this is a pain point for people when they start up, and then also be aware as to why that's happening, right? Because that's different from other things. Everybody with me there? Okay, great. So that's one of the main gotchas here that people experience at the beginning. Let's animate something. We're going to animate this ball. And so over here, just like in Unity, you got this gizmo up here that you can use to rotate the environment. And then like in Blender, you can go back and forth between perspective and orthographic mode by clicking on the center thing. And so if I click on this, you'll see it kind of flattens it out so that I could see things and move them in this view. Now if I hold down Alt and start dragging, you see that I'm orbiting. Why does everything look weird? Because I clicked the center circle and I am in orthographic mode, where things in the distance will not appear smaller. And so clicking in the middle toggles back and forth between perspective and orthographic, okay? Again, this is only for you in the scene view as the person working on the game. To change the view of the game itself, you need to change the actual camera object. And the camera object for us for this week is fine. We just need to leave it where it is so that player can see what's happening, right? So, great. We're going to do the quintessential animation thing. We're going to make this ball bounce, and then that's step one, animation. And then we're going to make it interactive so that it sits there, and then when you click on it, it bounces. So we will have completed both things in the title of the class. So let's animate it. A few words about animation in Unity. So for the most part, this is going to be very similar to After Effects and Blender in that we're going to set keyframes, and it will interpolate between those things. So that's good. But it will be slightly different in that, one, you can have animation clips. here at the beginning, we're just going to have one clip called bounce. But in the future, you can have multiple pieces of animation for one thing, right? Mario's got the idle, Mario's got jump, right? And spin, a bunch of stuff, right? Other objects maybe don't have as many different animation clips, right? The Goombas just really have, this. I guess the feet kind of move, at least in the first game. Today, it's going to be very simple. We'll just make one called bounce. But in the future, you can have multiple clips for one object, and they need to be managed, right? How do we go from jump to walk or whatever? In order to do that, you need the animation controller. And so that's going to be a separate component that sort of manages animation clips. Both of these will appear as assets. And then lastly, different than Blender and different than After Effects is that the default for a clip is to loop. Okay, so again, this is different from Blender and After Effects because there we're just going forward in time, right? Because the animation starts and the animation ends at some point, right? In here, how long will the game last? It's a trick question, right? Like, who knows? It could be a long time. Like, some people like do it fast, other people do it slow. It's a non-linear thing. And so because of that, the default is to loop, right? If you've got your guy sitting here just doing this as a idle, you want that to just keep continuing until something happens, right, in the game. And so this default is slightly different than other situations, other programs, okay? So let's look at how this actually manifests itself. How do I animate this sphere? So I'm going to grab the sphere here, and I'm going to come over here to the animation tab. If this animation tab is not there, you can go to Window, Animation, right? So here we get into a little bit of like Unity vocabulary friction. The animation window is where you're setting the keyframes. The animator, this is the thing that controls the animation clips. We'll see the difference here in a minute. We're going to deal with this first, right? This is just the name of the interface. In the file I give you, it should look like this. Like it should be down here. I usually keep it docked down here so it looks like Blender and After Effects and, it's similar. Great. And so, like I said, we need to have these files in order to animate something. And so they've made that a little bit simpler in that when you select an object that is not animated, and you go over to the animation window, it gives you this button. It says like, hey, there's no animator or clip on this. You want me to just create both of those for you right now? You just want to hit this button and do that? And in this case, yes. However, in the interest of staying organized, I would first select a folder where you can keep all of that stuff, right? And so I'm going to come back. Before I do that, I'm going to come over to Project, and I'm going to go to Assets, and I'm going to right-click and create a folder, and I'm going to call it Animations. And so I'm going to have this selected so that when I press that button, it automatically puts them into that folder. You could just press the button anyway and then later move those into the folder, but it just saves you a couple steps. Over here, I'm going to say Create. There we go. And again, you're storing the animation clip as a file, and so you need to name that file. And so here, I'm going to call this bounce, and make sure we're in the animations folder and save. There we go. Okay, so now we're ready to animate something. Allow me to just call your attention to this. This is for putting the whole game into play mode, okay? This down here is for just previewing the animation on that object, right? So the whole game won't start. Like in our case, we're just going to make this ball bounce, and so we'll just play the bouncing ball. In a bigger game, It's just whatever animation is on that object that'll play. Cool. Okay, great. So let's animate this. I'm going to look at it from the side. So I'm going to sort of rotate this and go into orthographic view so I can adjust it a little bit more easily. So this works a lot like the other programs where you can put it into record mode, and now everything that you would change would get set as a keyframe. Or you could put it into, or you could set the keyframes by hand. In our case, we want to bounce this ball up and down, and so I'm going to go to position, right click, and say, here we go. Let's do it this way. I'm going to go to record mode. You see that this is red. And so now if I were to just move the ball, you'll see that I get an automatic position keyframe. Now I'm going to move the playhead forward in time and move the ball up like so. And now we want to, come down, back down to the ground. But like I said, everything in Unity loops by default. Ultimately, we're going to make this, not loop. We're going to click to bounce, but that's a step away here. So this is a big one. Everything loops by default. So strategically, we want clean loops so that when something repeats, it doesn't have, right, it's like swaying back and forth. And it like goes over here and goes over here and then back, like some sort of swaying dance animation or whatever. If the beginning and the end points weren't exactly the same, you would get some sort of glitch every time the thing looped. Almost always, we don't want that artistically. We want to have like some sort of smooth loop, right? And so the way that you can do that, the tactic for implementing that is copy the beginning to the end. This means that if you do that when you start off animating, here it is at the beginning, copy, paste at the end. Now, no matter what you do in the beginning, no matter what you do in the middle, you're going to end up back at the same location, right? So, for instance, I'll do it right first. I'll copy this one, Control C. I'll come over here and Control V. And so now if I hit play, it goes up and down, smooth loop, right? If I were to delete that, and now, it starts here, ends or bounces up to there, and now I wanted to come back down, and I did this. I'm like, it was like, right about there. Now, if I hit play, I get that glitch there because the beginning position and the ending position are not exactly the same. This is not what you do absolutely 100% of the time, but a lot. This is the technique to make sure that you have some sort of smooth looping animation, right? Especially for things that are like in the environment, things that just keep doing whatever it is they're doing without player input, right? For things like the character, it's much more complex. You can end up in a different position. As long as you account for that, it's a different situation, okay? So here, I'm going to delete this and grab this and Control C, come over here and Control V, and now I'm going to turn off recording. This is another one of those play mode situations where students leave this on and then they start just like messing around with some stuff and setting keyframes for all of it, right? And we don't want to do that. We want to, no. And so it does turn this red here, which I think helps notice that. And so again, here we're not playing the game, we're just previewing the animation. In our case, if I hit play on the game, it'll look the same because that's all our game does right now. It just makes the ball go up and down. There's no interactivity yet. We're going to get to that. Everybody with me so far? All right. I know it's a lot of steps. This is new to everyone, but yeah, not a whole lot of room for like wonderful artistic expression this week, but we're just sort of getting our feet wet, thinking about what it is, experiencing this program. Okay, great. So that's there. Notice that on the sphere, now there's another component, the animator, and this is the thing that controls the actual animation there. Great. Okay, very close. So now we're getting close to finishing up the animation. This is the single clip with keyframes. Let's make this look like a bounce. And so just like all of the other programs, there is the dope sheet view, and then there's the curves view. And so if I go to curves, if I have the sphere selected, I can see this. If I press F, it normalizes it so that it's a little easier to see. I'm going to actually select it all first, then press F. There we go. Now it normalizes it so you can see what's happening. And the colors here, again, communicate which axis is animated. And so we're going up and down on which axis here, not you. Y. Yes, thank you very much, Punchy. We're going up and down the Y. But this ball does not look like it's bouncing. It kind of looks like it's just someone has it on a stick and they're just kind of doing this. Max, why is that the case?
It's not squishing.
Okay, squishing would be good. That's still one step away, right? That would be icing on the cake. There's stuff that we can do without squishing that would make this look more bouncy. I know you know. Put your hand down. What's that?
Stretching?
Okay, squishing and stretching are the same thing. It doesn't have any weight. Why does it not look like it has weight?
Because it's not changing the pace.
Okay, I mean the pace is changing, but it's not in the way that communicates weight.
It doesn't have gravity, I guess. Would be the
It doesn't look like it has gravity. Punchy?
I was gonna say as something like that, where basically because it's using a linear sort of transformation, it's like gonna be like completely smooth throughout and not have any sharp points where it's like quick or whatever.
Yeah, you're close. You're close. You're on the right track. You're on the right track there, right? So the thing that I went over this morning, or no, I think this afternoon. When you're looking at the curve editor, we'll get into this in more detail. Anytime you see a curve, this equals some sort of change in speed. You need to memorize this, right? This is across all the programs. This is just like how you represent movement on a graph. Anytime you see a curve, that means it is either accelerating or decelerating, right? Not just like a distinct curve, like any curvature in the line is the mathematical representation of acceleration or deceleration, okay? Which way it curves, whether that's speeding up or slowing down, depends a little bit on what it is you're looking at. But if it's curving, that means it's accelerating or decelerating. Anytime you see a line, that means that it's moving at a constant speed. Okay. Do we want lines for this animation? No, right? What does gravity do? I love doing this. What happened to that as it traveled towards the floor? It went faster, right? Fell down, right? It's in order to animate, you sort of need to dissect the real world on this level, right? Intuitively, Maya's completely right. Like it fell off, it fell down, right? What is falling? Falling is accelerating towards the earth. That's what gravity does. It accelerates towards the earth. And so that's why this, as Fritz said, doesn't look like it has weight, because look what's happening here. This is where we approach the ground and we are curving like this. And so this means we are decelerating as we come closer to this bottom position, which is not what we want in this case. We want it to look like it's bouncing. And so we need to accelerate on the way down. And so in this case, we can grab this handle and sort of curve this like this. And so in the bouncing ball example, if I curve both of these, in Unity, this has a very fortunate coincidence, is that the graph of the bounce looks like a bounce, okay? That works to our advantage in this instance. This is not always the case, right? Sometimes the graph editor can be visually unrelated to what it is that's happening, or at least less obviously so. In this case, it's very clear. And so now, if I hit play, bounce, right? The next thing to make this even better, right? So the animation word, or the word that's common in animation culture, is to plus it, right? You made a thing, congratulations. How do we make that thing better? Let's plus it, let's plus it, let's plus it. Squash and stretch would be a plus here. We're not going to do that today in order to like keep things simple. We'll get to that next week, okay? But we've got it bouncing, right? Even without the squash and stretch, we have what looks like, ping pong ball bounce, right? Because ping pong ball definitely bounces, definitely has weight and gravity. It's just a light thing, but it looks like it has weight, but it doesn't, necessarily squash and stretch, right? At least not in our regular interaction with it, right? If you watch the slow-mo cam and all those things, like you can see them deform, but that's not our typical experience of it. Okay, so now we have a bounce that looks like it's bouncing. Everybody, students usually see this and they're like, oh yeah, that looks better, right? But understanding why it looks better and what we changed to make it look better, that's where you make your money, right? That's the whole job, right? I've got this thing, this doesn't look quite right. Why does it not look right? What do I have to do to make it look the way that I want it to look? That's it. If you can do that across any context, like, good, right? And so we just did that here. Okay, great. We have a usable, animation. We'll talk about squash and stretch coming up here. Let's click this again so that we're in perspective view. Great. Now, let's take a step out. So this first week, right, I'm presenting it to you. You're going to have to, play this back, sort of follow along, go through step by step, right? This is just at the beginning, okay? So don't let that turn you off too much here now. We're just trying to get everybody, get their feet wet with this. How do I think about these things, right? I need to animate, and then I need to control the animation, and then I need to add interactivity to this, right? And so in my mind, while I'm working, I've got some sort of high-level sequence of events that I need to execute here. And then I'm sort of breaking those down as I'm working in the interface into smaller steps, right? I don't do this by memorizing like 90 steps. I know where I'm pointed at a target. I know where I want to go, and I know what the general gist is to get there. And then I sort of incrementally solve the problems to get there, right? So, check. Got that one done. Okay, control the animation. This will be new because this is slightly different from other things. And so here, we need to go from this one, where we're actually moving the thing, up to here, where we're controlling the interaction. So this window will look different and new. I don't see anything. Why do I not see anything? Because I don't have the object selected that's actually animated. And so I need to select the sphere, boom. And so now I see some stuff. And so what we have here is what's referred to, right? So the Unity name for this is the animator. That's the name of the component. You'll also see it referred to as the animation controller. Okay, so I'll probably sort of haphazardly switch between those two things. That's the name for this part of the interface, okay? The name for this type of thing, right, not in the Unity word, is that this is a state machine. Okay, so this is like a programming / systems term that is exactly what it says it is. We're creating a series of states, and then we will switch between them based on some, in our case, mouse click, okay? So this is a way for, this is a GUI for controlling a state machine. Our machine here is, for day one, is going to be really simple, right? Later, it'll get more complex. And at some point, this kind of interface for these things can become cumbersome. But anyways, what do we have here? You can zoom in with the mouse wheel here and see what's happening. And this represents this down here, the keyframes that we just set, right? And so I called it bounce. So this box represents all those bounce keyframes. This represents the game starting. And so when the game starts, this connector here means that bounce automatically starts playing. And then we don't need to worry about that for right now, or that, right? For the time being, just sort of ignore those. This is the functional thing. The nice thing about this is that this, is new to most people. It can be kind of confusing and cryptic, but if you throw the game into play mode, watch what happens. Boom. This actually animates, right? So you can sort of see what's happening in the state machine. So this sort of feedback, especially when you start getting a more complicated situation, right? You got like an idle, maybe your character waves or has an emote or whatever, right? There's a lot of different things that could be happening. And even if you're watching it, you're like, I'm not exactly sure what it's doing. You can watch it here to see exactly what the computer thinks it's stepping through. What state is it in? And so it goes from entry and then it just stays in the bounce state. Make sense? Right? So yeah, later this gets more complicated. I mean, ideally you keep it organized and it doesn't turn into like, something truly obnoxious. Yeah, I mean, we won't get quite this bad, but we'll do things that are slightly more complex, right? Yeah, I mean, this is a GUI interface for doing this type of thing. You could also write your own code that does this, perhaps more simply, or perhaps like it'd be tougher to understand. It would just depend. Okay, great. So that's good. But what are we actually doing? What do we want to achieve here? We want to have this ball sit here, and when we click on it, it bounces, and then it stops. Or yeah, it needs to not be doing anything, and then we click and it starts bouncing. Okay, so that's what we want. So right now, what we're missing is the implicit state of nothing, right? The ball sitting there, right? Because right now, the only thing it knows is bouncing, right? So how do we represent not bouncing, just stopping? We can do that fairly easily. We can right-click over here and we see create state empty, right? So if we just don't want it to do anything, you can just create a blank one, and there's essentially no animation in here. And so I can select this, and then I can change the name of it to, stop. So now I have two states. I can bounce, or I can stop. The thing that's a little bit confusing here is that you can't click on these connectors. You sort of need to right-click on them, or select them, and then you can delete them. Or actually not, there's another irritating thing. Okay, you can't delete it because there's no other state here. What we can do is this. When we start the game, we don't want it to bounce. We want it to bounce when we click on it later. When we start the game, we want it to stop. And so what we can do here is right-click on stop and then say set as default. And so that will drag this thing over there. It just, this is a crappy part of the user interface. Like, of course, you want to be able to drag it from one to the other. It just doesn't do that. And so now it starts at stop, and if I hit play, nothing happens. Great. That's what we want, right? We want to have nothing so that we can play bounce later. Cool. Okay. So I would say this closes the door on the animation part of what we're doing here, right? We've got a ball. It can bounce, and the bounce looks like it has weight. Mission partially accomplished, okay? So next, what do we want to do? We want to be able to click on the ball to have it bounce. And so this is going to require interactivity. Anytime we have interactive, real-time stuff happening, this is going to require code. This is what code is. It's some sort of branching instruction. This could happen or that could happen is like one of the simplest versions of that, right? And in our case, again, we're not going to concoct this out of nothingness right now. We are going to add a script to the project that's going to let us trigger an event. So a lot of our interactivity in this class is going to be in this form. We'll have a library of stuff that we can do, and I've designed a lot of the stuff, and Unity's designed a lot of the stuff to be modular. Legos, right? Legos are the universal modular design example, right? If you have a bunch of Legos, you can make a whole lot of different things. And so this, in general, is a good way to structure these things, is that we have little pieces, and you can combine those pieces in different ways to make all sorts of different functionality, right? So today, super simple, it's just going to be like one Lego piece that we add and configure to make the click work. Sound good? Okay, so let's do that. I'm going to come back over here to the assignment. And today we are going to add the script ourselves. And so what I would write down is that the scripts will always be this kind of file, CS. What do you think CS stands for? Good guess, but no. What was the language that Unity scripts are written in? C sharp. CS, C sharp, right? Sharp being spelled out, S-H-I-A-R-P. And so this is the script. I'm going to go ahead and download this. And there it is, right? So it just comes in as this. And how do I get this into Unity? I'm going to go ahead and save. I'm going to go to the scripts folder. And then I'm going to just pull up my downloads and drag from here into here, let go, and boom, it's in my project. So adding things to your Unity project, most of the time is that simple. Okay, you can just drag them in. Now, when you're adding scripts, it's code, right? Does it work with all the other stuff you have? Perhaps. If it was designed to do that or works on its own, there's a lot of things there. This one sort of stands alone. We don't need to add other stuff to make this work. It works by itself. Okay, and so the other thing I would write in my notes is that scripts, again, become components. So essentially, this is most of how we interact with them. You add a script to an object, and all of a sudden there's a new component on that object, and they can have parameters, meaning that there's stuff you can control about them. Not in every instance. Sometimes you just add it and there's no interface and it just does a thing. But most cases, there's something that you can adjust in it. So let's add the script. We added the script. How do I add the script to the sphere? Just like we did the material. So you can click and drag it from here onto here, or you can click and drag it from here onto here, or down here at the bottom, you see where it says add component? Once you add the script, you can click on this and you can search for the script. And so in this case, what do I call this? Click, right? So click on event collider comes up right there, and I can add that. And so now this again is on the sphere object. Almost there. Almost there. Everybody ready to make this happen? Okay, stay calm. Here we go. Click on Event Collider. And so here, what is this? Unity event. This is essentially, a message that says, do something. The nice part about it is that in a lot of instances, you get to pick the something, right? The event just represents the do it now-ness of it. And so what does this script do? When you click on something that has a collider, it sends an event, and then you can do stuff with that event. So, for instance, here's the format for these. And so this event gets sent when you clicked on the object that has this thing. So I'll make this fairly simple here at first. Well, let's do it this way. We'll say plus, and so this allows us, it makes like a new slot here in which we can send some instructions. And this may seem a little cryptic here the first week, but you'll get a feel for this, is that in these Unity events, here, this field is which object? Who are we talking to, right? Because we can make this object do stuff. We could make other objects do stuff. Which one? You need to provide the object you want to talk to in this field. And then over here, this is where you say, do what? Okay, what do you want it to actually do? And usually this involves selecting a component and then calling a function on that component. So for this week, let's do this. In our case, it's kind of redundant because who do we want to talk to? The ball, right? The sphere. And which object are we on? The sphere. And so I kind of need to drag it onto itself there so that we know it's talking to itself. That won't be what we do every time, but in this case, yes. Then under function, this is where it's going to get a little cryptic, and I'm just going to gloss over a little bit right now, but just pick the one I pick. And so if you had to guess, right, this is a list of all of the components that are on the ball right now. Which of these components do you think we want to talk to in order to play the animation? Which thing manages the animations? That's a good intuition, but it's not right. We set transform keyframes. That's also a good guess, but also not right. Sorry, Punchy. What's that? The animator. The animator. The animator is the thing that we're going to talk to. Those were both really good guesses, but in this case, I can see how you would think that, but in this case, we need to talk to the animator, right? And so we need to select the animator, and then we need to say play, right? So you select animator, and then you get this giant menu. Just focus on what I'm picking out, which is play string. We'll talk about this later. And so there we go. And so now I get this, and I get a field here. And so this is which animation clip do I want to play. So which clip do I want to play when we click on it? Exactly. So this is one of those unfortunate things that's not very forgiving, is that when the string is the name of it. And so the name needs to be totally correct, right? The computer can't guess what you're doing in these instances, right? You named it bounce, or I named it bounce, lowercase b, and so I need to make sure that that is completely the same here. It's the name of something, and it can't be close. For the computer, if it's different, it's different. It needs to be exactly right. And so in this case, I'll just type it in. So it's exactly the same as this. Okay, pretty good. Okay, so we've got that configured. So even if you don't totally understand what I just went through there, you need yours to look like this, and you need to go sphere first, then animator play, string, then bounce, okay? Do you type bounce in here? You do if you named yours bounce. If you named it something else, you type in whatever you put there. I would recommend just naming it bounce so it's the same as mine for now. But it's just the name of a thing. Okay, we're pretty good. Click save. Now, here we go. All right, we're doing nothing. Now if I come over here and click in the window and click on the ball, boom! We did it. Exciting, right? I promise the class gets better, okay? Right? We're just sort of laying the groundwork here for everything, right? And so now we clicked on it and it switched from nothingness to playing the bounce. You want to see it again? Let's watch it again. Okay, so go into play mode and notice that when I click it's not working, I need to click on the ball and then it bounces. That's the way this particular script is designed, right? And that makes sense, right? Clicking, you want to be able to click on specific stuff, right? And so this allows you to do that. So the thing that allows for that to happen is this, the collider, right? The collider, what I would write down in my notes is that in Unity, we have a collider. This is what a lot of people would refer to as a hitbox, right? So not backs, box. There we go. Right? Everyone is experienced this in video games where you're like, that dude totally didn't hit me, but it killed you in the game because the visual representation of your character is different from the shape that the game uses to evaluate the game functionality, right? That seems frustrating. Certainly, if they're very different, that can be frustrating, right? Why is that the case? Why not just use the pixels to decide whether or not you got hit or not? It's because that would be way more computation. There's this separation between the functional shape and the visual shape, and that's true in 3D and in 2D. They're two sort of separate things. And in Unity, that shape is the collider, but you can think of it this way, right? This is the thing that does that. And so this is where we'll call it a day. And so for Tuesday, what I'll have you guys do is simply, your presentation video for Tuesday is going to be just you in Unity demonstrating that your bouncing ball does indeed bounce when you click on it, okay? So let's back up a little bit and think about this from a couple steps. One, yep. So we're on the clock till 6:40. I think there's a little bit of a change from before. And today, a lot of times I'll end early, a few minutes, but today I'm going to cash in those extra 10 minutes. So just allow me to do this. One, it was a lot of steps, okay? But what did I do while I was working? You'll hear me refer to this again and again. Avoid the big bang, okay? What I didn't do was do something the whole way through, and then at the end, hit the play button and hope it worked, right? Because if that's the case, and it doesn't work, which, especially at the beginning is the case, then where did I go wrong? Gosh, it could have been any of those things, right? And so check each step, right? And I was doing that as I went along. When I made the animation, I just previewed the animation to make sure that looked like what I wanted it to look like and fix that part. Then I went and configured the animator, and I put the game into play mode to make sure the animator worked correctly. So now I knew my keyframes are correct, the animator is configured correctly. Then I went and added the script, configured the thing, and checked that last part, right? So I wasn't doing all the steps and then just praying as I pressed the play mode button. Especially here, right? Like I said, it can be more complex. Essentially, it will seem way more complex when you just get started. You want to check each step as you're working in order to, when something goes wrong, you can narrow it down. You're like, okay, well, all of that stuff worked before. It's got to be the thing I just did that wasn't quite right in order to fix whatever it is that's not quite correctly configured. So it seems like a lot of steps here, but you're going to be able to configure stuff later on. And then, there's not a lot of room for wonderful artistic expression this week. We're just making this interactive ball bounce, but we've done the whole class. We've animated something and we made it interactive, right? We're just going to essentially do that again and again and again and again, just better. Sound good? Everybody excited? Awesome. Okay. So again, this goes up to YouTube. It'll be up there right now. And then the assignment for Tuesday, I'll turn on probably tomorrow morning once I make some changes, because it was configured for last semester where we had 2 days and we covered slightly less stuff because we only had 1 day today. Sound good? Okay. And I think everything else is in place. Great. All right. So